This mini-series concludes today with Powers of 10 number 6, and the themes that are brought up in this are very relevant to this entire mini-series, but relevant to our lives. Does survival at all costs make someone inherently good or evil? Does believing in the inherent goodness in others make you good by default? Is it more complex than that? Is death inevitable? And the prevailing question that the X-Men always seems to seek to answer, is the Sentinel War inevitable? This story is really taking on its full form today, and I haven't been happier with any mainstream storytelling since Chris Claremont had the reins, and I'm talking across the board: movies, television, literature. This is my favorite ongoing story. So this conclusion, at the end of it, it felt like it was a story about determination. It sparks this intense resolve, as though the words that are spoken throughout the book really just give light to a feeling, and that feeling is whatever the cost, whatever it takes. A lot was revealed today in the conclusion of this miniseries. We're given a fuller picture of what Moira has gone through, and we're able to see that possibly by setting aside the assumption that goodness is the highest abounding characteristic in humans, that now it's maybe possible that mutant kind survives, right? Although Moira seems convinced that mutants inevitably lose, Charles and Eric are more determined than ever. Eric says, "I will die for it, and if I fail, then you will raise me up. I will show this world what a real mutant is." So, of course, Jonathan Hickman is writing this masterpiece, and we have the whole team together today. R.B. Silva and Pepe Larraz are together on art, Marte, Gracia, and David Curiel on colors. So, be forewarned for the rest of this video. Again, there are spoilers, but in addition, I get very philosophical in this video. My perspectives begin to change a bit for this series after reading this issue, right? And, when we talk about heroes and what makes a hero, it's always a common idea that, a hero be willing to sacrifice himself for a greater cause, for the greater good. We absolutely see here in this final dialogue between Eric and Charles their willingness to die for this cause. It's just the cause is a little different, because the cause is survival at all cost. And so a prevailing question that I'm having now, is survival at any cost, the territory that they're heading into now in this upcoming series of the X-Men, is that inherently good? There are many questions that we can ask as we continue to move forward in this series. If survival is the highest law, wouldn't it make sense that it's also the highest good? Very possibly so, but again, as I pointed out previously, all of these questions, these ideas, Hickman doesn't attempt to force your answer about these feelings or notions that come up in the series. In writing it itself, it allows you to ask questions yourself and decide where you stand. And again, I know I mention it a lot when I talk about storytelling, but when it comes to any kind of social issue, to address them without any kind of preaching, that's beautiful storytelling. And again, I love these reveals here. This recap here in the very first 6 pages, this is the same carnival from the first Powers of 10 book, where Moira reveals their past lives and her previous experiences to Charles. And I know it takes up space here in the beginning of the comic, but I feel like it was really essential to kind of picking up where we left off, so to speak. So again, we go through that, and, she reveals her mind to Charles. And after that scene, it picks up again at the end of this next one, but we move 1,000 years in the future again, and we're pushed back to see the librarian. He's entering the preserve, where he's immediately attacked, and we find out that it's Logan that's attacking him, who's apparently been trapped in this zoo for likely almost 1,000 years. And, the librarian, he says, basically, I'm superior, I'm faster than you, before you even conceived of coming at me, I already knew you were going to do it. And we find out that, like the librarian, these robotic nano-sentinels in the far future, they have the remainder of mutants in this habitat. And Moira's getting blood transfusions of Logan's blood to keep her alive all this time, and that's quite a reveal. The librarian is talking to them both when she shows up, and he says, or the librarian says, everything is going to be ending. The last of humanity will be joining the Phalanx and their technological collective consciousness. The librarian then tells them the big secret, so to speak, and that is, if Moira stays alive, then basically the Sentinels will win. They reveal that they believe, he believes, the librarian believes, that existence within the Phalanx would be a fake reality. I kind of think of it as like the Matrix and such, and so I almost feel like this whole entire scene is the librarian giving up the ghost and allowing himself to be sacrificed because he doesn't want to live in a fake world. Or is that the case? Because, again, it's very possible as well that the librarian is setting himself up and faking them out in the future. It will be seen, I'm sure, and all of this will come out, and everything, I believe, is going to be relevant in this ongoing series coming up. So the irony being here is that the Sentinels and the Nimrods, they weren't the end of mutant kind in this timeline. We discovered that it was actually the development of genetically engineered Ubermensch that fully destroys mutant kind. And just as true to Logan's rebellious spirit, teaching all of the mutants there in the habitat to rise up against their quote-unquote robot overlords, he stabs the librarian through to its death with a really witty quote there. And, with all of this new knowledge that Moira acquires, we see for a second time Logan resets Moira's life with another huge reveal as he stabs her and ends her life. It says, "So ended the 6th life of Moira X." And the big reveal there, of course, was that all of these future things that have been happening, the 1,000 years in the future, 100 years in the future, this was Moira's 6th life that was missing from that graph, that timeline, in that one issue. And, wow, that's a big deal. Again, it's not as big of a reveal as finding out Moira's mutant power, but again, this is where a little bit more philosophy comes into play, and that's where I have the most fun when it gets philosophical. We go right back to finish that very first same scene from Powers of 10 number 1 at the carnival. And we see that Charles does not take all of this information very well. He sees all of Moira's lifetimes and so much pain and agony, you can see it reflecting in his face, and it's very intense. The 16 million mutants murdered at Genosha, countless of other deaths, just almost always at the hands of the humans. And even after gaining the understanding that they will always lose, he actually even asks her, "Do we always lose?" She says, "Yes, we always lose." Charles still in that moment believes that he can somehow make a broader appeal, or select his students better, or in order to promote a coexistence with humans. And Moira, this is the thing, about this timeline, everything. She is what's changed in this story. The difference has been her all along, and not just her mutant ability, but it's this issue that kind of tells the story of her psychological effect on Xavier, and how his philosophy changes because of her. And she believes, of course, that she needs that, and it could very well be the case that a change and a shift in paradigm is necessary for the survival of all of mutant kind. It hangs on the balance here. She says, "Not once in all my lives have you changed," telling Charles. And after Xavier thanks her, she says, "It's not a compliment. You're a good man who believes in the goodness of others, and it breaks my heart that I have to break that part of you. You've been dreaming the wrong dream, Charles, and it's long past time that you wake up." That's beautiful. And these resource materials here, on these next few pages, they're kind of a catalog of diary entries from Moira to herself, or whoever, or someone else. And it tells a little bit deeper into what's been going on, some information from her perspective, and there's some information redacted as well, and I'm absolutely fascinated to see what that is, because it's always something fun and revealing. This shows that Moira is really the mastermind shaping all of this, shaping everything that's happening. And here's an interesting concern that some people have voiced, and I may have some of that as well, that it immediately comes up to me, is her calculated deception toward Charles. And how deep that goes, we really don't know yet, mostly because of that redacted information, but it's shaping up to be some very interesting story developments in the future. And this last journal entry, it's the most revealing, explaining that in our current timeline, Moira's 10th life, she has faked her own death and has gone into hiding. And, I see her intent here, part of it. There's a few different things as far as that intent goes. From one angle, to throw off the enemy. But, with all of that deception going on here, there's bound to be even more ulterior motives, besides the one that she's revealed here. Moira, Eric, and Charles, they're all keeping a secret. And apparently that secret, from one perspective, is that they lose. But here's the thing. There's this feeling that I got when I read this issue, this very intense feeling. Moira reveals that she's very afraid of Destiny coming to Krakoa because of Destiny's precognitive abilities. And she claims that it's, to hide the fact that they can't win against their enemies from everyone else, from all of the inhabitants of Krakoa. But I suspect it's something deeper, and like I mentioned, she's hiding things from Charles. Her and Charles and Eric are hiding things from everyone, and only time will tell that there may be something a little bit more deceptive behind her actions and what she's doing. Again, it'll keep me glued to my seat for sure, and keep me coming back and reading. With every single fascinating reveal, you get some new questions that do come up with this ingenious storytelling. Again, this art is gorgeous, and I absolutely love it. It's some really good stuff, but I can't help but be just focused on the storytelling above everything else. So not to take away from the art, but Man, this story is great. Again, it's the themes. This really appeals to me. These philosophical questions that this issue at least brings up in my own mind, that I'm kind of talking about here. For one, like I mentioned, does believing in the goodness of others, does that make someone good? Does that make someone heroic, right? If you're fighting for your own survival, is that heroic? If survival is the highest law, wouldn't that be goodness inherently? I've heard it said that good is what you like, and, evil is what you don't like. So if that's the case, then you certainly would like to survive, wouldn't you? So, interesting thoughts about the philosophy behind this story. Again, there are different viewpoints that you can approach this from, and I'm interested, I'd love to hear some of your own ideas, some of the philosophies that you think this series has been exploring, some of the themes, some of the things that are kind of relevant to our own lives. Let me know what you think. So this is it, this very last bit in the issue here. Eric says, "I am not ashamed of what I am. Let them try to stop us this time." And Charles says, "Yes, let them try." So my question to you is this. Do you think that this will end in their success, their failure? Is their fate destined? Is it predestined, the way that it's always unfolded? Or has Moira finally done the right thing and made the perfect decision here to embolden Charles Xavier and allow him to come into an important decision about his own philosophy? And that decision, and I'm starting to come around to this idea that maybe Charles has changed for the better, possibly, to finally acknowledge the fact that survival is the highest law. And in order to save an entire race of beings, Homo superior, wouldn't that be the decision that might finally bring them to survival? Again, I've had a lot of different perspectives throughout this series, and I can see a lot of different angles that could be approached here. So, just like I mentioned before, I want to hear what you have to say and what you think in the comments. This is kind of more of a philosophical discussion about this book, about this whole series. I'd also love for you to hit the bell and get notified of my future videos, because this weekend I will be putting up a longer summary video on this entire miniseries. We're talking about House of X and Powers of 10, the entire 12 issues, kind of talking about it, talking about the writing. And what I loved about how each issue revealed something special or ended in a very incredible way that leaves the reader begging for more, whether it be an emotional ending or a big reveal or a cliffhanger, right? So again, this is going to be an amazing series coming up. Welcome to the Dawn of X. You are the gateway into comics.